Hi, this is Linda, and in this video I wanted to share my thoughts on including art in interiors and installing art, and also the subject matter of art. So I'm going to show you some of the projects I've worked on. This first one is a garden home in a seaside community in Duxbury, Massachusetts. And the clients had a remarkable collection of art and accessories, antiques, vintage pieces, some of quite a lot of value, others not a lot of value, but maybe some sentimental value. And opening up her packing boxes was very much like being a kid on Christmas morning. She had such beautiful things. One of the primary items they had was this beautiful oil painting of a ship that is actually quite a special piece, and it deserved what is traditionally the most important location for a piece of art, which is over the mantle. And sometimes you just go with what is the most traditional and the most obvious choice. And in this case, for this piece, it was. And as you can see, there were bookcases flanking the fireplace, and it was a great spot for displaying my clients' collections. On the left side of the fireplace, we had, there were books and small decoys, and you can see on the second shelf from the top there was some framed music, which was actually compositions from the clients, some ancestor of the clients, and their violin. And on the lowest shelf there is a bird print that all of which are just leaning against the back wall, and this gives it a sense of casualness and not too formal, not too fussy. On the in the cabinets, the display shelves on the right side of the fireplace, there were fewer shelves and therefore gave more prominence to what was on the shelves. And in that case, we mounted the framed sailing print on the back wall, and we didn't have quite as much stuff. This gives a sense of permanence and therefore a little more formality to this side, and simplicity. And I think that, you know, obviously you can display art hanging on the walls, mounted on the walls, or you can lean it. And leaning gives it a sense of casual, temporary nature, and mounting it gives it more formalized, permanent nature. So it's just, you know, how you want to display it, what makes sense for that particular space. And as we move to the side, you can see that there was beautiful sculpture that we had on the floor of a woman, and the blue pottery, which was leaning up again next to the antique cabinet, were all depictions of women. And so this was a sort of grouping of female-oriented items that the modern sculpture doesn't necessarily go with the blue and white Delft pieces, but they do in a thematic sense. And I just thought that that kind of worked very nicely for the space as a whole. And it also drew the eye across from one side to the other, and there was always something interesting and purposeful to look at. With the same client in their bedroom, she had this pair of Curry and Ives lithographs, and we wanted to hang them a little lower. We wanted to hang them in relation to the architecture created by the shutters, in order to create a very simple, calming space and not add any tension. If they had been mounted higher, the plane would have been broken up. The horizontal plane that's created by these shutters and then the art would have been broken up, and it would have added a little more tension. And I think that you know, that's certainly fine in some instances, but I think in this space, the calm nature of just simple lines straight across made a little more sense. In their dining room, this client has a beautiful, wonderful collection of paintings in many different medium of pretty much the same subject. And this is this collection of these boathouse paintings. They own a property down in Cape Cod that's a vacation summer cottage on a river, and it has this boathouse, and it's a very famous local spot for painters to go and paint and do their thing 4 seasons all around the year. And as a result of them allowing people to just go onto the property and paint as they like, they've been given or they've purchased many pieces. of the same subject matter, which is really makes for a very interesting collection. So we selected these two images for the dining room because they are really incredible pieces of art. They work well together, and they really deserve to place a prominence in the public areas of the house. But they have a whole bunch of other pieces that are different frames, different styles, obviously different artists. And I felt that the way to group them, it made the most sense to group them together, as opposed to just spreading them around the house, to put them all on one wall. This is their den / sort of guest room. It gave you a real sense, floor to ceiling, of the breadth of this collection, and it made all the pieces more important because they were grouped together. This next image is a vignette that I created in a showroom in the Boston Design Center at the Webster & Company showroom. This was from my magazine. I used to produce a digital magazine, and it depicts a very contemporary piece of art that was quite large, and I accessorized around it with the concept being maybe it was a front hall of a townhouse or that sort of thing, very modern. But the accessories, the faubourg table, the very formal stylized chair, the bright crystal lamp shade on the crystal lamp, they all brought out the colors that were in the painting. But this was all an exercise in accessorizing around a painting. And on sort of the other end of the scale, this was a condo kitchen that I had, and I think there's no reason you can't put art and photographs and paintings in kitchens or bathrooms. I do both. And this was a little photograph that I had that I just leaned up against the back wall under the cabinets. Don't ask why I wasn't actually covering the outlet. That doesn't make any kind of sense, but there it was. And I think it just adds a nice little surprise element in a space that you don't necessarily expect it. This was a Bachelor apartment I had in the Back Bay of Massachusetts, Back Bay of Boston, overlooking the Charles River. And he has a very interesting art collection, and we purchased some extra pieces, and he has a very interesting carpet collection, but generally his aesthetic is very calm, very straight. He doesn't like round things to any great extent. But the piece of art on the wall, actually, while the 5-panel piece is in and of itself very architectural, it depicts a very soft, the art itself is actually quite soft, I think, and flowing. It has a lot of movement. In and of itself, it filled up the wall nicely. It created a nice punch of color in an otherwise serene space. But one of the things I particularly liked about it was that, to me, it mirrored the windows. It gave a sense of pulling the view, which is spectacular, across to that side wall, and then, shaking it up a bit. But it was sort of, the view is broken up because of the fire escape out the windows and all the windows. And then the abstract art also broke up the view and kind of shook it around and put it back together. And I just thought that really made for an interesting display of art that really reflected the space and was perfect in the space. This is his bedroom, and he didn't, if we look on the right, he didn't have a headboard, so we mounted the pair of coordinating prints lower on the wall to create a vignette, and the same thing on the left with the small print, which was mounted basically dead center in the wall between the two windows. And the reason why we do this is when you mount art, you want it, if it's over a fire, if it's over a sofa, it's over a chair, you want it to create a vignette. You don't want it to just be floating in the wall. If these had been mounted higher, they wouldn't have had a whole lot of relationship to the pieces of furniture below them, and they just would have felt just sitting on the wall but not connected to anything. And These heights that you're seeing here would have been a more normal height to be hanging these pieces, but I don't think they would have worked anywhere near as well as the lower, more connected, sorry about my phone, the lower, more connected hanging of these pieces. This next piece photograph is of a modern beach house I did in Truro, Massachusetts, and the clients found this artist, a local artist, who did this incredibly beautiful sort of abstract, but not really, painting of water flowing, the tidal water flowing onto a beach. And it was just incredibly perfect for this space. It's modern, very almost stark, but comfortable. The whole room view, I'm sorry this isn't a better photograph, but you can see the cobalt blue we pulled throughout the room that was mostly just sandy beiges with pops of blue, because the fact of the matter is this was what the view was, and in a space like this you want to highlight the view and you don't want to distract from it. But this painting certainly brought the view into the space, onto the one wall that you didn't actually, when you were looking at this wall, you didn't see the view. So I thought it was a really perfect choice, and then it was accentuated by the stainless steel and glass table with hard sort of cold surfaces, which went very well with the frame on the painting, and then the just simple blue linen chairs. And this was a project I did in the south end of Massachusetts, a very formal, traditional living room, very monochromatic color palette. And for the artwork over the sofa, I really felt we needed something simple. We needed a modern touch, something to be a juxtaposition against the real traditional formal. And also the other side of the room, there was a lot of busyness going on. There were mirrors, there was a fireplace, there was a painting over the fireplace, there were sconces, there were lots of smaller framed items. So I really wanted this side of the room to be much calmer, and I found these pieces that were just, I thought, had lovely movement to them, but really were of a piece on the wall. It didn't really scream out at you, but just created a nice, calm, serene moment, and went extremely well with the furnishings, window treatments, everything that was in the space. There was a nice integration of art and space, I felt. And then this is my own house, and I have a lot of small and medium and some large pieces of art, and nothing particularly precious, but things that mean something to me that I've collected along the way. And this is obviously my dining area, and I realized once I put everything up that in fact everything on this wall was architectural or travel related. Everything was pictures of buildings, and I thought that was kind of interesting, that's what I gravitated toward as I was going through all my pieces of what fit on the wall and what made a statement, and what made me happy to look at, because I sit in this space every day. And here is another angle. On the side wall, you can see I have a print of Norman Rockwell's Stockbridge Christmas, and actually it's a signed print. It's a very important piece in our family. I had reframed after I cleaned out my parents' house, and there it is on my wall, and I just really love it. It just speaks to me of Massachusetts, but it's also all buildings and travel related. So I thought, it was kind of interesting grouping that came together without really thinking about it in those terms. This is my little antique desk, and again I put a grouping of photographs that I took. This is of the Edith Wharton estate, the gardens, and I like the fact that it connects with the framed piece in the bedroom, which is the room in the back with the chair, and that is of another photograph of Tuscany from an artist named Anne Henning. But I liked the fact that when you look from one to the other, there's a connection of those pieces, and it draws the eye from the foreground to the background. And in my bedroom, I also wanted a gallery wall, and I kind of think of this as my granny chic gallery wall. It's a little more intimate paintings and a little more random collection. The round framed pieces are actually painted by my aunt, who was a noted New England watercolor painter, Merrill, and she, I believe, painted those when she was a teenager for my grandmother, her mother, and they came to my father and them, and now I have them, and they really are very special. And then two of her other works are also on the wall, the study of a seagull and then the winter piece. So it's really nice to have family art. And the other pieces were just items that were, my mother had sort of around, and they filled in the space. And then over to the right is my mother's wedding gown portrait, and then it's a little obscured, but a picture of my mother and I as a baby, and then what you can't see is a picture of my mother and I just not long before she passed away. And a lot of designers don't like family pictures on walls. They sort of think it's, I don't know what they think. I happen to think if it's important to you, it should go on the wall. Those pictures are important to me. It's my bedroom, so it's not a prominent place, but I think that you can make it work if it's important to you and it's your space. You can make it work. And a little detail of my bed, and I always loved the man on the horse painting print that my parents had my whole life, and I always sort of thought of it as Mr. Darcy. I have my own little Mr. Darcy. And then in my living room, which is a tiny little space, 8 by 10, I had found these very interesting prints of the studies, the drawings of some of the gardens at Versailles, and I thought that I just loved them. I loved the framing. I loved the size. They're large, and they just worked perfectly on the wall above my sofa. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed my tour of some of the art that I've used in my interiors. And please let me know in the questions if you have any, in the question section, if you have any questions or comments. And thank you so much for listening.